Good morning. Our speaker today is Ursula M. Burns, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Xerox. Growing up in a rough public housing project on the Lower East Side of New York City, she's an individual who overcame the obstacles of race, gender, and class to become the leader of a world-renowned Fortune 500 company. After graduating from NYU Polytechnic with a degree in mechanical engineering, Ursula joined Xerox as a summer intern, a position many of us are very familiar with, at a company that she ended up never leaving. Without going into too much detail about her rise up the ladder at Xerox, it is important to at least mention that she has worked in every nook and cranny of the company over her 30-plus year tenure, from product development to manufacturing, from supply chain operations to research and development, marketing to distribution, and domestic to global. Currently, she is leading a major transformation at Xerox, a company long and best known for its success in document technology. Xerox revenues in business process outsourcing and information technology are now larger than those for its document technology business. Truly, the last time the public was as excited about Xerox was when the secretaries on the show Mad Men raved over the first photocopier to be introduced into the workplace. Ursula has a well-earned reputation of being a fearless and charismatic leader, an open and candid communicator, and an individual who always speaks her mind. Her story is one of perseverance, strength, intelligence that many of us can learn from. So it is with great honor that I welcome Ursula Burns here today.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Not bad, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Ursula. It took, I think, a couple years till we finally managed to bring Ursula out to beautiful California and to UCLA.
She's been persevering for
And
quite a
we are
while.
so appreciative about how she has juggled this in her calendar. Thank you, everyone, for being here. The drill today will be that I'll ask some of the questions, and I'll be sure to leave you with a lot of time for your questions. The questions have come from you, from our faculty, and from me. And I think that what you'll find is that Ursula embodies the authentic leader term. Ursula, I think everybody who's a leader is a product of their upbringing. Talk about how where you came from relates to what you do today.
One of the things that Jennifer said in her introduction is that I overcame the obstacles of race and gender, which is the way I'm actually introduced a lot. I actually didn't quite think of race or gender as an obstacle, but it's just kind of who I am, right? Being a woman can't be an obstacle, and definitely being black can't be an obstacle. It's kind of, that were the case, we would have half the world kind of sitting out here, trailing behind these non-obstacled people, but which has happened for quite a while, but we're trying to change that a little bit. My upbringing, I was, and I tell a story to kind of give some context. I was born and raised with a brother and a sister, brother older, sister younger, by a mother, single mother, in the Lower East Side of New York City. And so I entered the world and grew up in the world from a point of view. And my point of view was the only point of view that existed. We don't have TV, back then we didn't have TV like we have it today. You couldn't see all over the world. We had 3 channels and we had no internet and that kind of thing. So the world that I saw was the world for 5 blocks around me, essentially. Everybody was like us. We were all poor. We were all living in not so great circumstances. So the world was a small world. And my mother positioned this world as a starting point for my life, not the end point of my life. It was just a place I happened to be then. And her whole life, her whole goal with my brother and I realized this obviously as I got older. When I was younger, I thought she was just being a pain in the rear end and, just nagging and narrow-minded and all of the stuff that you think about with your parents when you're growing up. Her whole goal was to make sure that we had a good foundation from a values perspective, that we understood that we controlled so much more of our life than we thought that we did, that our circumstances didn't dictate anything about how we would end up in the world, our current circumstances. She was really focused on that in the way that she communicated to us, and that education had so much to do. And not only formal education, but just being aware of the world and being sensitive to the fact that things will change and can change, and there's opportunity out there, and et cetera. Those two things, this idea that there's an education and I have control of my future, was a major piece of how I was brought up. And so when I was growing up, I didn't actually think of it as there were other people who had X and we had Y. I thought about it as everybody has X and we wanted to get a little bit more of X. Not that, and so it was an interesting, not an underprivileged foundation. It was a kind of a privileged, it was an opportunity foundation. It was not graceful by any stretch of the imagination. We didn't have a lot of money. My mother really struggled to feed us at all of the time, all of the times. We didn't get all of the great clothing, all of the stuff like that. But it was never, we were hovels in the street struggling to try to figure out where our foundation was. We were clear. My mother was clear about that. And so her thing was, I'll give you an education. This is my portion of the contract. To give you an education and make very clear. My mother was very black and white. Certain things were right and certain things were wrong. And now we have this thing where it's right if, and my mother never would have gotten into that kind of conversation. You just never lie. One of her major foundations, never lie. You just don't tell me. If you lie to me, that's equivalent to like murder. That's a big deal. So anyway, I had a very strong set of foundations to grow up on, and my mother's thing was, you control more than you think, which is just about everything to do with you, and there is no substitute for hard work. And she was not, if you saw her today, my mother died when she was 49 years old, when I was 25 years old, way before I became this massively successful person. If you saw her today, if we had a film on her raising us, you would either arrest her, because today you don't do the stuff that she did, yell and scream, and sometimes, she was a great mother, but she would smack us upside the head sometimes if we didn't do the right thing. Nowadays, you can't even come, get near your kids if you... I could. I couldn't do, but she was a very tactile parent and a very vocal parent. And she made it very clear what she wanted us to do, how much control we had in our lives, and what our jobs and responsibilities were. But she also loved us insanely. And we had a good family structure around us as well. We had aunts and uncles and, people who took care of us, so it was good.
And that's turned into your own expectations of yourself, your expectations of others?
Yeah. This turned out to be good and bad. Right? So the good news is that the bad news is that failure was acceptable if energy and effort were superior. And if there was any hint that energy and effort was not superior and there was failure, that was unforgivable. Translate to leading a company today, right? It's not actually a good it doesn't translate cleanly all the time. So a lot of the things that I have to do is make sure that I understand that people are human beings, that this company is made up of human beings, and sometimes they're distracted. Sometimes their families are a little bit, the kids are sick. They had a fight with their wife, so they're not always at 100%, head down focus, and their efforts are not always 100%. But that's not because they are not dedicated. That's because they're people. And for me, it took a while for me. Fortunately, I learned it more so when I'm in the position I am now. But I remember some of my earlier jobs, I was insane. When I was running manufacturing, there's no way in the world we could not do what do you mean we can't do it? Just means that we have to work a little bit harder. What do you mean you can't? And that's not reasonable. Maybe 2 people you can do this with, 2 people of like mind, maybe 3, maybe 4. Try to do it with 100,000 people. Try to do it with anything bigger than you can actually get your hands around. It's hard. So this intensity, that wasn't kind of like a whip, but it was just very clear, very focused. This intensity doesn't always translate well to leading a group of just human beings, right, which is what we are.
So I'll get to that in a moment about how you've evolved. But let me ask just 2 questions in the audience here. I think I know the answer to the second. But how many of you are ex-engineers or current engineers? It's a big one. Yeah. Right. Ursula,
obviously, I have a bias towards
yes, through and through.
Towards engineers.
And how many of you have worked for Xerox or used Xerox products? Okay, I knew the answer to that. But I'm now going to ask the engineering question. How did you morph from an engineer to a leader?
Yeah, never morphed from an engineer to a leader. Never morphed. I think that I was always an engineer and I was always a leader. Right? And I think you can start or be a leader from many different, seed points that you start your life on. For me, my upbringing and my life was one of order. One of the ways that my mother assured that we were safe and focuses that we had a huge amount of order. Expectations on when things would be done, on how things would be done, and what a good level of performance was, etc. And you can test your way to order, right? One of the things I love about engineering is that two things. There's usually an answer to a problem. It may not be elegant to start with, but you at least get it working. So it's a world of possibilities with engineering, and then you work over time to make it elegant. Right? So very few things are left to chance. You actually work on them. And the second is that it's a discipline. It's a process-driven discipline, and it fit well. I happen to be very good at math and fairly good at science, but the way that engineers actually operate their discipline fits well with my background. It just so happens that I literally lucked into finding engineering when I was going through school. And as far as leadership goes, I had to early on, because we didn't have a lot of choice, and it wasn't like I said, a bad thing. My mother actually expected us to control a lot of our destiny, to make decisions, to actually think about things, to make choices. So I actually, I think, swung the pendulum in a very bad way towards leadership being control, if you know what I mean. So we're going to control the situation. There's a problem. Let's plan a solution to the problem. Let's manage our way to the end, that kind of a thing. And so I think that in the beginning of my career, in the beginning of a lot of people's career, that's probably a good place to start. It doesn't last very long. Especially if you're managing yourself, it's very good. Maybe 2 or 3 people, it's possible. But as an organization gets bigger and the problems get more complex, the amount that you can actually control from the top is very, very small. It's amazing. It's actually one of the most frustrating things about being a CEO. I would say, so I thought we had agreed, I say this all the time, I thought we had agreed that we were not going to do X, Y, Z. And I have a CFO who just left not too long ago who was only in our company for 2 years, but he got to know me very quickly. He said, Ursula, we didn't agree, you said. He said it a couple of times, in different situations. And I'm now mid-50s. I should know this. Of course we didn't agree. I said, but I thought that if I said that you would agree. And his response, he didn't articulate this too much, but he just kept reminding me that one of the biggest things about leadership is that you have to be able to develop followership in people. And it has to kind of happen without saying, I'm trying to develop followership now, so, this is the transition. It has to kind of happen in a morph way. And even to this day, I'm reminded often that just because I said doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Ursula and I talked on the way over about how that sounds familiar to being in a university with tenured professors.
Right. Well, you can't say anything. You can't ask.
You have to ask for followership, and you have to, compel followership. One of the things that I think is so amazing about Ursula is that she's very transparent and lets her vulnerability and learning hang out. And you've talked about how you've learned and changed over the years. How did you change and how did you learn?
I was speaking to a group of students earlier, and I get a lot of questions about leadership style, and I actually kind of get back to there are certain things that school can't teach you, right? And they actually help you refine it, but they can't teach you these things. And that's being a good person, having a reasonable set of values. I mean, these things that we actually now debate a lot. There's a lot of debate about this stuff. But generally, we know, and I had to actually keep going back to this. The change was that I tried to make it complicated. I tried to make it, highfalutin, and whenever I'm confused or concerned about a course of action, I try to step back and say, is it right? Is it right? And I don't mean moral. Is it right in your gut? Is it could you live with it? At the end of the day, can I live with it? And, are you being kind? Are you being balanced? Are you being reasonable? Are you having reasonable expectations? And most of my learning has been to keep going back to those basic questions, to not make it that complicated, particularly as I move out of the specific job. So when I was an engineer, those questions came in less. Right? When I was doing engineering in the lab, they came in very little. And as you get more and more people engaged, the questions become more and more basic. And what I had to learn in time as a leader was that the most important questions are the most basic questions. And that is, can you live with it tomorrow? If when you do this and it has the light of day, can you say, yeah, that's what we did. And here's the reason why we did it. Can you live with it? And that's what I've learned, that you can't go too far from that point. And it's not, you can get a PhD in anything and master's in engineering, and it won't help you be a better leader, because being a good leader, I think, is grounded in being a good person. So.
And you had talked about the role of mentors in helping lead you to change too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Anne and others.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk? And maybe this is the time to talk about the transition from Anne Mulcahy to you, which was considered the textbook case of smooth, glorious transition. Yet I know under the surface it was probably more animated and a bit more negotiation than meets the eye.
It was clearly animated and negotiated. We were two women.
That's the greatest.
The great thing about women is that they're animated and emotional. That's a very, very strong attribute that we have. And so neither Anne or I checked that too much at the door. When we walked in the company, we definitely didn't check it in the door when we were in her office talking about an issue.
You worked together for so long.
For so long.
Yeah.
So first, Anne, I was, the textbook transition of a CEO to the CEO was made even more textbook because it was a woman to a woman, and it was a woman to a black woman. So there was a whole bunch of focus on this. But I think that the woman to woman and the woman to black woman aside, the transition that we went through between Anne and myself was amazing. And here's the reason why. First of all, Anne Mulcahy is, I said this a little bit earlier, she was like Mother Teresa in our company. She was literally loved across the board. She became CEO and rescued our company from the brink of failure, and she still is, not just a nice person, very pleasant person, very light person, pretty smart, and she came up through the salesperson line. By the way, very good negotiator. She had a whole bunch of brothers, and she had to fight her way to have a conversation around the table, so she knew how to kind of hold her own. She was not a weakling by any stretch of the imagination.
Going back to the roots.
The roots, but she was very graceful, very, very graceful, and very even keel. And I'm not. By the way, that's not necessarily good. So one of the things I've watched is there are two CEOs. I'll talk about one of them in a minute. One is Anne, and another one is Ken Chenault at American Express.
Who was here also.
It was here, yeah. I'm on his board. He is very even keel, just amazing guy who, and it's so unlike me. I just sit there in awe watching these people. Like, why didn't you blow up? Why didn't you, make your point clearer or stronger or whatever? So anyway, Anne ran the company, loved, decided, I'm right behind her. And I'm right behind her in the beginning, fairly smooth and pretty okay. And then as I got more and more confident in the company and higher, you get a little bit more antsy. It's like, I can do that job. I know that I can do the job that you're doing. So when are you going to move? We never had that conversation. We never had the conversation, when are you going to move? But she felt me right behind her. And and she realized this is the first lesson that Anne left when she was 6 years before you would even think you had to retire. You know what I mean? And she decided that if she stayed that whole time, she would lose me. And me, not lose the next likely successor to the company. And she had done her piece. And so while it was early, it was appropriate. Imagine the grace.
And a gift to the company.
Imagine this, right? So first, very unusual to say, I'm going to release it, and because Xerox can get probably 12 years versus the 5 years I can give them if we make this transition, which was amazing. That was one. The second thing that she did was she actually said to me, "You're the president, I'm going to sit in most rooms with you. We're going to be together most of the time. And I'll very rarely talk over you. So when you start, you do your thing. But I will tell you afterwards when you kind of went off course. We very rarely had a went off course conversation, but we did have, whenever we had one, it was on for the same reason. It was on how I behaved or interacted with an individual in the room. She would always, whenever I got scolded by Ann or taught by Ann, it was about behavior, not about decision. It was about the process that I used and the interaction I had with people, not about the decision that I came up with, and which was an amazing thing. So when it came time for her to, when she was comfortable, that I wasn't going to like torch the furniture or whatever the hell, do something absolutely wild, she called me in. She had already spoken to the board, and she said, so we're going to make the transition in the next couple of days or weeks or month, whatever it was. And she said, I want to make sure that you understand something, that I'm going to tell you nothing else. You're not me, and so don't try to be me. If we needed me, I would stay. She said, but we don't need me right now, we need you. And so you have to lead this company from a you perspective. So she stayed around. I was president for a year and a half, and she taught me for a year and a half. She basically shrunk into the background. She was still the CEO of the company, pretty much the chairman, and she was the chairman of the board. But she actually made it clear to the organization without declaring that I would likely be the leader. And so she gave me all of the ability to learn the people and to think about the company. And she hired a great team, and most of the decisions and a pretty good board. And most of those decisions, I had something she talked to me about. So she engaged me in a way that didn't cut off her neck. It didn't abdicate her responsibility, but gave me a lot of responsibility. What I learned from that is that this is back to the same thing. This was a good person. Right? This was a good person. And she said, how would I want to be treated if I knew that I would take this spot? How would I want to be treated? And she did to me what she would want people to do to her. It was amazing.
And what a gift to have a trusted counsel.
Amazing. Amazing.
To coach you.
Yeah.
I mean,
By the way,
we all want that.
I benefited from a lot of counsels. I had a lot of people. Maybe it was because I was so kind of like out of the norm. And I don't mean that I was odd. That's not the norm. I had a lot of people who gave me advice. Some of it I liked, some of it I didn't like. But everybody was giving me advice. Early on, there's people who I value and whose advice I will listen to. It's a big position, meaning there are a lot of people who give me advice that I give them no time of day whatsoever. I don't waste time on it. So if you want to give me advice and I don't have a lot of respect, I just don't listen to it. But there are people who actually, and this comes in all levels in the company and all levels in society, who tell me things that I listen to because they actually have earned the right for me to listen to them.
But this is an interesting message on mentoring, because we often talk about the fact, how do you get a mentor? In your case, they came to you because they were rooting for you because of your performance and aspirations.
Yeah, and because I'm actually a really nice person. And I mean that, I don't mean that, I mean, I'm actually pretty cool. I actually engage and I talk back and forth, and I don't really BS a whole lot. I do, I mean, I can do a small chat like anybody else, but I actually, if I don't want to do it, it's pretty clear that I don't want to do it. So there's a space around me that's in some ways pure. And this is going to sound better than it is. By no stretch of the imagination is as good as it sounds. But there are certain things that I just don't engage in. I don't want to engage in it. I don't like it. I'm not interested in it. And don't interpret that to think that I don't like you or I'm not interested in your things. But I don't play golf. I don't go to golf courses. I don't say that because golf is a bad sport. My actually husband seems to like it a lot. And I will watch Tiger Woods play a game occasionally. But if I have to engage in that, if that's the way that I'm like, no, absolutely not. So that's an example of some of the black and white. And I think people actually found that was in some ways relieving of them, refreshing for them. They didn't have to kind of do all of the other stuff. There's this stuff like, we're going to take you to dinner. Dinner is not high on my list of things to do. I'd like to kind of go home and read a book, hang out with my husband or my kids, or hang out all alone. So can we do it like before dinner? And just do it can we do it in half hour or 45 minutes? There's no need to really court me or that kind of stuff. So I think that what's happened is not only that they wanted to help me, but I think that there was a connection that was pretty natural. So I had some people at work who helped me, a lot of people at work who helped me. One of them I married. One of my early mentors is the person who I ended up marrying, and we didn't date when he was doing the mentoring thing.
Remember that?
But he's kind of cute, and I thought he was cute. I thought I was cute, so
That happens.
we did that. I had a lot of people who were beside me, around me, at the same level that I was, who gave me hints and tips about how to communicate, how to dress, how to fit in. Not orders, just hints and tips, and I could choose them or not choose them. I had a lot of people who were ahead of me, who really didn't have anything to do with me. Anne was one of these people. She was in sales and marketing. We didn't know Anne was going to be the CEO forever until she became the CEO. Nobody really thought she was going to be there. And she was an interesting raising kid mentor for me, because she has 2 boys who are older than my 2 kids. And we would get into these discussions about how do you raise your kids if you're a privileged person, right? Because both Anne and myself, and many of the people who work at Xerox, at least from the generation I'm in, are people who didn't have a lot. Their parents didn't have a lot. So their parents didn't give people cars. Like today, the kids come to you and say, I need a car, and it has to be this kind of a car versus that kind of a car. And so we would get into these discussions, and she told me one day, we were sitting at a panel, she would talk to me about balance as well, balance. Just get over this balance thing. I use that now. I say this all the time, get over this balance thing. We were talking about raising our kids, and I said, well, I'm not going to give my son a car, because he's turning to be 16 or 17. All these kids have cars. I refuse to do it. And she said to me, Ursula, you're trying, the interesting point, she says, you're trying to raise your kids as if they are poor. They're not. They're not. You have to raise them to be good, well-off people. And I said, oh, interesting. Because I was raised in a completely different environment as my kids, right? We couldn't ask for a car. Asking for a car. My mother didn't have a car. Nobody in my family had a car, so we didn't have a vision of a car. My kids can now come to me and say, my friends have cars. I think I want a car. And the question is, you could say no, and yes, of course. And she would say to me, but at the same time that you say no, you're going to go on a trip, and the kids are coming with you, and they're going to fly on a private plane. So It's a little bit...
There's some discontinuity.
A little bit contradictory to... So you have to kind of get to the root, really, of what you're trying to do here and have context, and so that was interesting.
I'm going to ask a couple more questions, actually, on strategy, and I'd like you to be thinking about your questions, because I'm going to turn it over to you. So let's just talk about the business transition at Xerox. So today, I think about 42% of the business is technology copiers, and today, 52% are services, around 3 lines of business, and you articulate an aspiration of about 2/3 in 5 years. Talk about that transition, the role of the ACS acquisition, how is that changing the culture, how do you create followership, etc.
So the transition was one of an opportunity-based transition. Around us in the world, things were changing. People weren't printing a lot of certain types of documents. They were printing a lot of different type of documents. People weren't printing things at all. They were just saying, I'm not going to print it. The world was opening up from a doing business perspective. So lots of big customers were expecting we serve them in a kind of a single voice around the world. A lot of changes happened in the last 10 years in business. And what was happening is that those changes, good, bad, or indifferent, were affecting our company. And we could have just said, I hate these changes. I don't want to participate. We're going to stick to the thing that made us great. And we said that. We hate these changes. We're going to stick to the things that made us great. But the grace about this discussion was that we stepped back and said, what made us great? And most people said, well, what made you great was that you made a copier. And what made us great was that we had a guy who looked at a business process. His name was Chet Carlson. He looked at the business. He was a patent attorney. And he had to file patents, he had to get these people either typing or handwriting 7 versions of the patent. That's what the government required, 7 versions to go forward. This person, literally, he said, I'm a patent attorney. He had to get these people. They wrote them or typed them. There were always errors, and it was always messy. It wasn't consistent. The drawings weren't all great. And he said, wouldn't there be a great way if I could actually take a picture of this 50-page document and automatically, instead of hiring staff to actually. So he took a business process, which is communicating the content of his IP or his application, and applied technology and changed that business process. So this sounds like this amazing thing, because we said, well, no, we're a copier company. We said, no, we're a business process company, right? We actually made a whole industry out of this one business process that we changed. Very few people type 7 copies of anything anymore, right? They all reproduce it either by printing it or copying it many times. So what we had to do in our company was to really understand what is it that we did? What is it that we did? And what are the assets that we have? And when I became CEO, when I was president becoming CEO, Ann allowed me to spend time thinking about this with a lot of other people, not me alone, a lot of other people. And we had to look at the assets. One is that we understood business process and we understood how to change it, how to apply technology to change it. We were a global company. We have people everywhere. People in every country. They all actually act like Xerox people. This is a good thing and it's a bad thing about that, but they all act like Xerox people. And we have a brand that, while some people are confused about what the brand stands for, most people like it. So it's respected. It gives you entree. Xerox, okay, it's a real company, it's credible, it has good structure, the people seem to be pretty good, so it allowed us to actually, it gave us more permission than even some of the assets that we had, that we were practicing. So what we did was stand back and say, so I know the world is changing. It's a world that's changing for the better. A lot of technology, a lot of ability to communicate more freely, a lot more globalization is changing for the better. How do we participate? How do we take these assets that are indisputable? It's innovation, it's global reach, it's great brand. How do we take these things and a really good understanding about business process and apply it more? So what we did was we actually looked at other business processes. Most of them had documents in them, and not just paper documents, but any holder of information that is used to move a work process along. And we bought a couple of companies. One was in legal, very, very document intensive. Mortgages, very document intensive. And we bought these small companies, and we realized if we did this, it would take us 500 years to get anything, any size, and 500 years with 500 different acquisitions. We kept running across this company called ACS, and the reason why we didn't look at it in the beginning is that it had some issues with the leadership that we didn't particularly like, and second, it was big. It was, significantly bigger than we were thinking of acquiring by a lot, and this happened right in 2008 and 9 when the world was, banks we were questioning whether we were going to have banks at all. Whether they had any money, and how do you get the money, and et cetera. So we actually went after ACS. And this was a company, when I say went after ACS, myself and Ann and our CFO flew to Dallas and met with the CEO and one of his people and just talked about having a relationship. He understood, we understood, that we wouldn't just be sitting about talking about, we wanted to actually figure out whether or not we could have a deep and long-standing relationship where we bought them. And we had to make a decision, one, whether we like the company, and two, whether we can integrate it. So we've made the transition. We've transitioned from focusing on one business process only and becoming a business process company. So now we manage Medicaid, infrastructure, and the health exchanges for California. So we are the back office Medicaid information provider, MMIS provider for California. I was with them yesterday. We do, most of the time, if you get a ticket from a red light camera.
We don't like them in LA.
We give them to you. If you toll roads, multi-passenger vehicle roads, so we have a transportation line of business. If you have a cell phone of any sort, just about any provider, if you call to ask for a plan, information, or update or something, you're calling to a call center that's manned, staffed by Xerox people. So we have these are repeatable business processes. Everybody has customer care. Everybody has finance and accounting. It's pretty standard in the United States. You have a certain structure. Everybody has onboarding of people. So we have lines of business that are focused on these business processes that are fairly document intensive or holders of information intensive, and we train force in there. The problem on the culture, the problem with it is that when we bought ACS was probably 40% bigger in number of people than our company, than the base company. Xerox bought ACS. Xerox had 50,000 people. ACS had 70,000 people. And Xerox is a northeastern company. We have locations everywhere, but the leadership of the company is in the cold northeast, right. And ACS is midwestern and is midwestern. Very different speed of communication, very different kind of balance in the company. So there's some simple things that we had to kind of get over, but also just cultural things. We are a technology-driven company. We are a team-based company, Xerox. We are a company that's really focused on diversity. We literally are a company that spends time thinking about where we live and where we work. So we don't, and ACS had some similar things, but nowhere near the intensity that we had. So we had to step back and say, of these things, of these values, which ones of them are we willing to modify? At the end of the day, we decided we didn't want to modify any of them. So ACS had to, the company that became, the people that came over to us from ACS had to actually become Xerox people in that language. They had to become Xerox people from team, they had to become Xerox people from community, they had to become Xerox people from diversity, from our approach there. And that is hard to do because it in some ways says that what you were doing before, while great, we don't like it as much as we like our own, so jump over it. We had a lot of thinking about that, and I'm very comfortable that we've made that. We're not going to back off on that. It's been with us forever.
So please line up with your questions. I'll just ask the follow-up question, and that is about the role of R&D. Do you think, and the line that I hear Ursula use is, give us your mess, we'll make it beautiful, in terms of this process re-engineering. Do you think that the role of technology-based R&D has gotten a little lesser under this new strategic shift? And how did you move the engineers who are the true innovators? I mean, you developed the mouse and the personal computer long ago. How do you move them to this new business model?
It's definitely different, but it's not less. And let me tell you what I mean by that. It turns out R&D for when you R&D things is very so how that is brought to maturity is very different from a cost perspective and a time perspective than R&D of processes or software. One of the things about things is you got to actually make them. And you have to kind of mature the making of them, and that it's very heavy. It's a very heavy set of dollars and very heavy cycle times. And you do it. I know Boeing very well, and just think about they've shortened it by distributing it, but literally they had to build the pieces. You couldn't skip the part of actually having the plane to fly in, right? And test it. And so R&D, a lot of our R&D, all of our R&D in the past was on R&Ding things, or embodying things into other things, like how do we make our toners so that they can be scalable. One of the things that we found, I mean, in BPO, business process outsourcing, it's significantly less about things. It's more about bits and bytes. It's more about processes and software. So the amount, the ability to distribute is easier. It's easier. It's safer. That's one. And the cycle times are faster. And so what you'll see in our company is a move from between ourselves and Fuji Xerox, our partners in Japan, where we have a technology arrangement that basically makes that arrangement, the output of that Xeroxes to use in these territories. We spend about $1.5 billion. We'll spend $1.5 billion in the future. You'll see us spending a lot, the Xerox portion of it spending a lot less on things, and a lot more of the dollars on process, and therefore a lot less dollars on it. But we still have a huge arm that develops things. It's a big change. It's interesting as well that process-driven work is not used to research.
Right.
It's used to kind of creating, which is research, but it's used to not such an organized
And sometimes
approach.
acquisitions.
And but by the way, a big piece of our growth is acquisitions as well. I mean,
Right.
of our intellectual property growth is acquisitions as well. So it's a big change. It's hard because our history is so much thing-based. I have manufacturing plants. I have a QA system that you name it, and we're trying to shift the researchers to more process-driven research, which is easy. The researchers are easier. The engineers are hard. We're going to leave some engineers behind. I mean, I'm hoping to do it as a natural retirement transition, because we're going to have to hire a different type of finisher, refiner of research, or bring into market of research, because it's just a different set of skills that's needed.
So I'm going to actually start at the back, since you've started the last 2 times in the front. So I'm going to start at the back.
Sure.
And introduce yourself, please.
Sure. My name's Chris Brandt. Thank you very much for coming today. I'm a
Welcome.
second-year MBA student. I had the opportunity to work with Xerox prior to school in representing them as part of a team in some real estate transactions. Xerox was one of the most demanding clients we worked with and had a very stringent approval process, and wanted to know your thoughts on how you think about the balance between having very strict approval processes in place that a global company needs versus setting up a creative community, given that you're in a technology company and creativity is necessary moving forward, and maybe that stringent atmosphere isn't as conducive to creativity. Thanks.
We call it bureaucracy.
I tried to stay away from that.
And yeah,
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
bureaucracy. Thank you, Chris. Bureaucracy and flexibility. You know, it is a continuous, ever-changing, specific to situation balance. And you know, one of the things that we found out in our company, you work there. We hire the best and the brightest people from UCLA, from MIT, you name it. They come, they work. We train them. They're great. And one of the things I found out about freedom is that uncoordinated freedom is not good. It's anarchy. And in a company, uncoordinated freedom is waste. And uneducated freedom it turns out to be wasteful. So the balance that we always try to create is one that we give people creative freedom, but we have a fair amount of controls. And so how do I feel comfortable? How do I make this journey? It's not answered all today. There are certain things that it's important to be able to decide about. And if somebody can come to me and tell me that, and have a debate with me about how they innovate, how they use, what systems infrastructure they want to use to create, for example, how they want to use social media to move their messages around, and I will have the greatest, this is where I like to have a debate. I have people who actually want to come to me and talk about what paper we use. They want to have a debate about the paper we use in our office, or whether or not the window shades are up or down, or what kind of window shades. My point here is we create very little value in this company around those debates, around those discussions. There's an expert who actually will watch our window shades. Don't be distracted by that. And so therefore, you get very little freedom in that. Very little freedom in that. If it creates value for the client, and it's generally on how we work and what we work on, then I try to give as much freedom as possible. But it's interesting as well that the sum of all the pieces, the sum of 147,000 pieces of freedom is generally a huge amount of expense. It's unaffordable by a company. So the balance that you have to actually do, you just cannot allow freedom, the way that we think about it, to 147,000 people. You know, people say, all I need to be able to do is hire one person. We'd have 147,000 additional people in the company. All I need to do is be able to spend, I have to have freedom of $50. Everybody should be able to spend $50. And you think about that with the number of people, so on. So you have to, what we try to do is focus on where is value really created, and to try to teach our leadership team, which is 140,000 people, that being able to pick the type of pencil that you write with, if that's the debate you're having with me, then you're at the wrong level of discussion with me. So you haven't earned the right to have the higher level discussion if you can't give up that freedom for a higher level freedom. So I want to buy pencils at the lowest cost possible. I mean, pencils is not a thing. But I want to be able to buy tickets. Airline tickets is a great one. Travel, huge cost in the company. I said, I just want to be able to travel on whatever airline I want. I said, but if we travel on the airline that we have a deal with, not only do they buy our stuff, which is a big deal, but also we get a good cost break. So the freedom of what airline you want to stand on is not one that I'm willing to have a debate because it's not value creating. But if you're going to create value, then I'm willing to have a debate about what do you need. You have it. So.
I want to just amplify what Ursula said, which is a very interesting concept. She said her leadership team is 140,000 people.
Yeah.
Everyone is a leader. Next question.
Hi, Ursula. My name is Ronnie C. Wright, and I think
Ronnie.
you're cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
I spent
Cool is really cool. I like that's good. I've been trying like hell for 24 years to be cool with my son, and 20 years to be cool with my daughter. I am just not there. So I'm getting it. Thank you.
It's easier when it's not your kids.
I spend a great deal of time on and work on my mobile device, and so do my friends and family. What is Xerox Mobile?
Yeah, we have we do it from
Thanks, Ronnie.
Thank you, very good question, by the way. We have it from many different ways. So one is when we engage with a large enterprise, so I'll use P&G as an example. P&G defines mobile in a particular way. They want their associates to be able to, particularly the leadership team of P&G, we provide this for P&G, so I can say it this way. They want their leadership team of P&G to have consistent printing capabilities in the printing. I'm talking about printing from this perspective. Consistent printing capabilities anywhere they are in the world inside of the P&G world. So they don't want to have to authenticate. They want to be able to literally walk up with a device, be recognized, and have the device be able to recognize what printers are around it so that they can actually print to it. So we've developed a whole, by the way, P&G is a great example, but we do it for a smaller company, smaller enterprises as well, which is a mobile printing application that allows people to feel comfortable, companies to feel comfortable about security, and which is a big issue, security of what they print and consistency of what they print and cost effectiveness of what they print. And so we work with clients. The technical part of this is not that hard. It turns out it's not hard to actually use the cloud or the internet or to be able to print. The problem that's hard is the security and the just-in-time and the consistency. So they want the look and feel to be the same. They don't want it, so on. So mobile for us is on providing our clients with the ability to do one of the most basic things that we provide, which is to print seamlessly anywhere they are in the world. But also mobile for us is about our associates, the people who work for us in the company. So they have to be able to print, but they also have to be able to operate their business kind of seamlessly around the world. Not everybody in my company actually travels. Most of the people actually don't travel. Probably 80,000 people sit in a location and do work, so mobile is not as important. But the rest of the people actually do travel and want to have access on whatever. This is a big struggle, by the way. It's a big struggle. Anybody tells you is not telling you the truth. On whatever device they want to be able to use inside of our firewall and be able to actually operate their business home, play field, client site, etc. It's technically possible to do, and what we're now struggling with is how do we actually do it safely and cost effectively. Because if you give everybody, this is back to this freedom, if you give everybody the right to buy whatever device they want, there are some companies, I won't say who, there's some companies where profitability is really not the big deal right now, revenue is the big deal. There's a lot of companies like that. I actually am in an old-fashioned company where we have to both get revenue and make money. It's a little bit of a kind of a unique situation to be in this country. But we have to do both, so we actually have to pay attention to cost. So mobility for us is literally that we don't tether. We don't tether unnecessarily people to a place. We have a lot of call agents, so customer care agents. The big step is, can you do that from home? Can you actually, not can you, you should be able to do that from home. It opens up a whole additional class of people, type of people, skill set, cost structure that allows it to happen. So mobility for us is in just about every single thing that we do, not only process, but technology, enablement, security, et cetera.
Thank you. Let's try and get a couple more questions in.
I'll make it
quickly.
shorter.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll echo everyone's thank yous. It's been great to be able to spend some time with a fellow female engineer, so it's been good for me.
And introduce yourself.
My name is Anna Penga, and I'm a second year here. I wanted to kind of follow up a little bit on the cost information that you've just been talking about and how you do have to manage that cost, but also go back to what you've mentioned earlier about humility and doing the right thing and doing good and not focusing on money. And as someone who is here trying to get an MBA to do good, I'm wondering how you balance that in the boardroom and in making strategic decisions. How do you do good and at the same time make money and make that profit?
Thanks, Anna.
It's a great question. Anna was in a meeting with me earlier where we were spending some time back and forth about what is it that you should focus on in your life, or I think you should focus on not only making money. It's one of my big points. It's hard to say now that I make money, right? So people say, well, you can say that because you make money, but I got here by not focusing on making money, by the way. But as a company, as a corporation, we have a lot of constituents that we serve. Shareholders, obviously our customers, our team members, and the communities that we work in, and so that we live in. So most of the decisions that we make about anything, but in this case, cost, balances all 4 of those constituents, not one of them. Most of the conversations happen from one point of view. Right? Most of the conversations, if you're an employee, happen from the employee point of view, or if you're a shareholder, happen from the shareholder point of view. One of the biggest challenges that you have as a leader of a company is that you have to kind of sit in the center and make these things come together. And they often come together over time, but they don't come together in a day or at a conversation. That's one of the big challenges. So how do we balance it? Literally. We have this saying, I didn't make it up, that you should spend your money, we should spend the company's money as you would spend your own money. And it sounds like a really trite thing, but it's a great check in your mind when you make any decision. So waste, if you have your own money, waste is just not a reason, it's not a good thing. But waste is not, I have 3 pairs of shoes that look like this. My husband would say I was wasting money. I was saying I was making myself happy. Right?
You bought them on sale.
Excuse me?
You bought them on sale.
2 of them on sale.
There you go.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But the first ones I fell in love with, and then I had to search the internet to see if I could find them again on sale, and I did, and I found them on sale. But, so not everything it gets down to what's the cheapest price we can get it for, what's the least money we can spend on it, because the value is not only in that. The value is in the entire equation. How much service can we provide with that investment? How much good feeling or goodwill can we get from that, with that investment? How much loyalty can we get with that investment? There's a whole bunch of things that come into it. And most of the time, this is one of the things I have a challenge with when we speak to customers, right? They just say, just show me how cheap it's going to be. And I said, if you want to get the cheapest thing, you will almost surely buy something from someone who doesn't have a standard of living that you would be proud of saying you bought the thing from, if you always wanted to get the cheapest thing. So we actually do try to balance that with, on a situational basis, and it's not only dollar cost. It's not only how much money did I spend for it. It's how much value do I get out of it? How much value from a loyalty, from a future innovation, et cetera, and we try to put it all together. We do pay a lot of attention to cost. We could, my controller's here. Leslie Barron, raise your hands. So I'm going to say something that she knows this already because we could do it. Every earnings quarter, every company, forget about Xerox, could earn significantly more money than they earn in a report. All you got to do, you just have to make no investment in the future. You have to literally squeeze everything you could possibly squeeze. This cafeteria stuff, cleaning every day, what the hell are we doing all that stuff for? So if companies ran on profitability alone, the outcomes would be very different in the short term than they are. It would be significantly higher. Most companies run on profitability as one of the many things that they have to be able to deliver. Loyalty, service to the client, good conscience, a lot of things.
Okay, this is going to be the next to last question, since mine is the last, and it has to be short.
Like you, Ms. Burns, I'm a product of my upbringing, and my upbringing was Xerox.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
my father spent about 30 years at Xerox. Before I was born, he joined Xerox. My mother also started with Xerox before I was born and worked in sales off and on while she was raising us. She was laid off last year. Don't worry, she's doing fine now.
Thank you. Thank you.
But the question I have, so much of my upbringing was around the dinner table talking about Xerox, the good and the bad. How do you, as a CEO, as a leader, develop that following and develop the trust of your employees when they don't have a full understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so part of it is to try to explain, try to get them a full understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. That's one. By the way, it's very difficult to do.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, very difficult to do. Very difficult to do because as transparent as our company is, and we are very transparent, there are just certain things you are not allowed to be transparent about, right? or timing is not good for you to be transparent about. But there are a couple of ways. There was a time when companies were like parents, like families. And you joined us and you stayed forever. We are still very much one of these kind of companies. Look at the tenure of our people. We're 15 years, 30 years, 35 years. But one of the things we had to come to grips with was that we could not be as much of that in the future as we were in the past, which is a hard thing to say, right? That means that there are certain members of our family who will not be with us at the end of their working life. And when we started our company, and particularly in Rochester, if you joined our company, you ended your working life with us. That transition is one that we are currently going through for sure. We are, one of the things that I have a set of mantras, and one of the things I always commit to my team, my employees, one is that I'll work as hard as is humanly possible to do right by Xerox. Second is I'll make the best decisions possible. So I'll decide something. And then third is I'll be frank and clear. And one of the ways that I can get people to understand, and this is not me alone, this is my leadership team, and this is every employee in our company who has a little bit of information to impart. We have to be able to tell the story. And I don't mean the story that we made up, but so why are we doing what we're doing today? By the way, this is hard, because I know significantly more than I'm comfortable saying, either legally or financially or just because I haven't formulated it. But as much as I can say, if you work in Xerox, you'll be clear to understand as much as I can humanly say about it. And what I want to do is people to make decisions on that. Sometimes they'll decide to not work for us. Sometimes they'll say, I just can't stay here. We're making a transition today from a technology company only to a technology and services company. We're making a transition today where if a machine broke, we sent a human being to the machine and fixed it, to one where if a machine breaks, we try like hell to not send a human being to the machine. Everything you can imagine to not get a human being to go out there, remote services, any kind of digital infrastructure. Now, if you're a service person working on service today, I just said that we're working like hell to put you out of work, right? So that conversation is one that I want people to understand, and we're going to try to prepare them as much as possible to have other lives. That's part of my responsibility, other lives, but also be ready if you're a service engineer. Right? I don't want you to be hanging out there hoping like hell that I got another set of infrastructure. We're definitely not going to keep fixing machines by people if we can fix them remotely, right? So part of the conversation is to make sure that people understand the trajectory of the company and prepare themselves as well to be ready for a change that can leave them exposed. Really hard thing to do. Really hard thing to do.
Thank you. Thanks. We're really out of time, but I'm still going to ask this one last question. And that is, you have kids in their early 20s, mid-20s. What do you advise them in terms of how they will have fulfilling careers?
First, find something that you love to do. And I say this, assume that money is not a factor here. Find something that you love to do. Second, work really, really hard. I don't care what it is, even if it's something that you don't love to do. Work really hard on your journey to getting to do what you love to do. And the third is don't shut your mind to learning something new about it, the world, whatever. So really find something that you like. If you don't like it, you can be great at it and it's going to be horrible. Second is work really, really, really hard and then learn about it. Be fearless. Speak up. Take a stance, you know what I mean? To engage. Don't sit back and have other people decide things for you. Engage. Speak up, be fearless, make decisions, and make sure that you work really hard. No substitute for it.
This is a remarkable, fearless leader and the most authentic leader one could imagine. What a lesson to us all. Thank you.